I'd like to study with you today from the book of John chapter 4. And if you would, let's turn there for just a moment. John chapter 4. Let's check the book. In John chapter 4, beginning around verse number 1, we find these words. When therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. And he must needs go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near a parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? And art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up unto everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. I want to study for the next few moments, if God allow us, on the subject, the woman at the well. I've looked at this lesson a number of times. God has blessed us. But every time we study this lesson, there is something that grabs me that I've come to gain, and I thank God so very much for what he's allowed me to come in contact with in regard to understanding more about this particular story. One of the things I want to share with you quickly is this is a magnificent scene of God's tremendous grace toward the sinner. When we look at the conversation, some of the things that we gather outright is number one. We'll find Jesus being the one that initiates the conversation at the well with this woman who is without question a sinner. Number two, we find that the first words that he offers her is give, which suggests the idea of grace. It's a word that is a non-threatening word. But notice her second word is give me, which says to us that he wants this woman to be now occupied with him. And then another thing that we learn in this conversation before we get started is the fact that he will bring this woman to see her helplessness. Yes, her helplessness. Here is a woman that's confronted with a question that Jesus asked her, give me to drink. And so he brings her to a point where she cannot do what he asked her to do. Not that she could not physically do it, but there were too many barriers that really hindered her from accomplishing what Jesus was asking her. Number one, she had to deal with the barrier of culture. Her culture meaning she was taught to learn that there were certain things in regard to how she needed to think, how she needed to perceive, how there were concepts that she needed to recognize. There were tastes and manners of life that she was growing up in regard to how she was taught. And one of the things that she was taught was there are certain people that you ought not to be bothered with because really you have nothing in common with them. That was her culture. She was told that Samaritans and Jews just don't get along. And what's sad sometimes is we come up in a world where folk are sometimes are pushed into a corner or taught certain things in regard to issues that really happened years ago that have nothing to do with what's going on now. Do you remember even in some families where Uncle John or Uncle Bubba did something to Uncle Tom hundreds of years ago, and now their children have been taught that you don't mess with Uncle Tom's children, but they don't even know why. What happened? 100 years later, and cousins hating cousins and don't even know why, because that was the kind of environment or the culture that was taught them. She had to also deal not only with culture but with race. Jews don't mess with Samaritans, and Samaritans don't mess with Jews because you're of another race. Another thing that she dealt with was a barrier in regard to her answering Jesus and complying with his request to give water. Well, she was a woman. You see, he asked her for water, and really she recognized that in an outward public area, men did not talk to women. So how could she respond to that kind of answer from a man? Then he was a Jew. She also had a barrier to deal with a bias. And when someone is biased in regard, I should say a bigot, that is a bigot, they are biased. They have already concluded that there are certain things that they feel is right, and no matter what somebody else says, no matter what kind of information is brought to change that their perception is correct, they stick to it. And so it's already formed in her mind, because of her culture, that there were certain people and things she just could not associate with. She had another barrier that hindered her from doing what God requested by Jesus, and that was prejudice. She had already a preconceived idea, didn't have all the facts about this man. She knew he was a Jew, perhaps from how he dressed and how he talked, but she already had preconceived ideas. And so Jesus brought her to a point where he asked her to do something that she could not do. So he brought her to a point to show her helplessness. And then another thing he brought for her as we look at the conversation, and that was he made her aware really of her ignorance in regard to salvation. Now, see, he said to her, after asking for a drink, and she brought up the question that you just know we don't have no association together. Why would you even ask me that? He says, if you knew the gift of God, and if you knew who was asking you this question, you would have asked for this living water. So she did not recognize and understand that when he talked about living water, he was talking about this gift, and this gift was and is eternal life.